December 19th, 1944, 42 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere in the frozen forests east of Bastogne, Belgium. Private First Class William Bradford pressed his eye against the scope of his Springfield M1903A4, watching a tree line 600 yards distant through air so cold each breath crystallized into mist that could give away his position. The rifle in his hands weighed 8.7 pounds, standard issue, except it wasn't standard anymore. 3 days earlier, in a bombed-out farmhouse that served as temporary battalion headquarters, Bradford had spent 11 hours with a cleaning rod, lapping compound, and a determination bordering on obsession, hand-polishing the inside of his rifle's barrel until the rifling gleamed like mirror glass. His platoon sergeant had called him crazy. The battalion armourer said he was wasting time. The German sniper who had killed 4 men from Bradford's company in the past 72 hours didn't know that. The American hunting him had just done something that would change how this particular duel would end. Bradford had made his standard-issue rifle shoot like a custom-built competition gun, and in 11 minutes, that decision would save his life. This is not a story about a secret weapon or a classified modification. This is a story about what happened when American resourcefulness met German precision, when a farm boy from Pennsylvania who learned gunsmithing from his grandfather took a mass-produced military rifle and made it exceptional, when the difference between life and death came down to understanding something the weapons manuals never mentioned. That barrel quality mattered more than scope magnification, that a soldier with knowledge could turn an adequate rifle into a superior one. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The M1903 Springfield had been the standard American infantry rifle since 1903. By World War II, it was obsolete. The Mohngarand semi-automatic rifle had officially replaced it in 1936. 8 rounds, semi-automatic fire, faster, more modern. The Springfield held only 5 rounds and required the shooter to work a bolt action between each shot. But the Springfield had one advantage the Garand lacked: accuracy. The bolt action design, with fewer moving parts, could be made more precise. When the United States entered World War II in December 1941, the Army needed sniper rifles immediately. They didn't have time to design new weapons, so they took the old Springfield, mounted a Weaver 330 scope on it, designated it the M1903A4, and sent it to war. Remington Arms produced approximately 28,000 of these rifles between 1942 and 1944. The production was rushed. Quality control was inconsistent. Some rifles shot beautifully. Others were barely more accurate than standard infantry weapons. The scopes were cheap. 2.75 power magnification, limited field of view. They fogged in humidity. They leaked in rain. Army snipers called them adequate. Marines, who received better scopes, called the Army rifles garbage. William Bradford received his M1903A4 in September 1944 at Camp Shanks, New York, 3 weeks before shipping out to Europe. He was 22 years old. Before the war, he had worked in his grandfather's gunsmith shop in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He understood rifles the way mechanics understand engines. When he test-fired his assigned sniper rifle at the range, he was disappointed. At 300 yards, his 5-shot group measured 4 inches, acceptable for military standards, unacceptable for Bradford. He knew the problem wasn't the rifle's design, it was the barrel. Mass production meant barrels were drilled, reamed, and rifled as quickly as possible. The internal finish varied. Some barrels left the factory with tool marks, microscopic imperfections, inconsistencies in the rifling that affected bullet flight. A bullet travelling down an imperfect barrel doesn't fly true. It wobbles. It drifts. At 600 yards, these imperfections turn a perfect shot into a miss. There was a solution. Hand lapping, a technique gunsmiths had used for decades to smooth barrel interiors. You took a lead slug slightly larger than the bore, coated it with fine abrasive compound, and pushed it through the barrel repeatedly. Hundreds of times. The abrasive polished away imperfections. The rifling became smooth, consistent. The bullet's path through the barrel became predictable. The problem was that hand-lapping took time, hours, and materials that weren't available in military supply. Bradford tried to explain this to the camp armourer. The armourer said no. Modifying military property without authorization was against regulations. Bradford would ship overseas with the rifle as issued. William Bradford shipped to Europe in October 1944 aboard a Liberty ship packed with 5,000 replacements. He brought his M1903 A4. He also brought, hidden in his duffel, a half-pound tin of valve grinding compound he'd purchased from an auto parts store in New York City, and a brass cleaning rod he'd modified to accept a lead slug. The crossing took 11 days. Bradford spent his time below decks, reading a gunsmithing manual he'd packed. The ship arrived at Southampton, England, on October 27th. Bradford's unit, the 99th Infantry Division, moved through England to France, then to Belgium. By mid-December, they were positioned in the Ardennes forest, holding a quiet sector where nothing was supposed to happen. December 16th, 1944, 30 hours. The world exploded. 2,000 German artillery pieces opened fire along an 85-mile front. Operation Watch on the Rhine, Hitler's last major offensive in the West. 250,000 German troops, supported by hundreds of tanks, smashed into American positions, held largely by inexperienced or exhausted units. The 99th Infantry Division held a 20-mile front with 15,000 men. They should have been overrun in hours. Instead, they fought with desperate tenacity. Small unit actions, delaying tactics. Individual soldiers making stands that slowed the German advance just enough. The battle that would become known as the Battle of the Bulge had begun. And in that frozen chaos, American snipers found themselves facing some of the most experienced marksmen Germany had left. The Wehrmacht took sniping seriously. Since World War I, German military doctrine emphasized precision marksmanship. German snipers used the Karabiner 98K, a bolt-action rifle chambered in 7.92mm Mauser, factory selected for accuracy. Equipped with 4-power Zeiss or Hensoldt scopes, many German snipers had years of combat experience on the Eastern Front. They understood fieldcraft, camouflage, patient observation, long-range shooting in brutal conditions. German sniper doctrine emphasized pairs, 2-man teams, 1 shooter, 1 spotter. They established hides overlooking key terrain, crossroads, supply routes, command posts. They eliminated officers, radio operators, anyone whose death would disrupt American operations. A single German sniper pair could pin down an entire platoon, could make a road impassable, could turn a forest into a death trap. December 17th. Bradford's company pushed east from their positions, trying to establish contact with units that had been overrun. They moved through dense forest. Visibility limited to 30 yards. At 1100 hours, the company commander was shot through the chest. 1 round, 600 yards. The shot came from elevated terrain to the north. The commander died before the medic reached him. December 18th. A supply convoy trying to reach the company was hit. The lead truck's driver killed by a shot through the windshield. The convoy halted. Within minutes, 2 more drivers were hit. The Germans had found the road, made it unusable. The company went without supplies for 24 hours. December 19th. Another officer dead. Killed while coordinating artillery support from behind a stone wall the Germans shouldn't have been able to see through. The platoon sergeant called for Bradford. They had a sniper problem. Bradford was the company's designated marksman. The sergeant wanted the German found and eliminated. Bradford took his Springfield, 60 rounds of ammunition, and moved to a position overlooking the area where the platoon sergeant estimated the German sniper was operating. He settled into a shell crater half filled with frozen water and began systematic observation. The temperature was dropping. Snow had started falling overnight. Bradford's scope fogged within minutes. He removed the scope and let it acclimate to the cold air temperature. 20 minutes. He could do nothing but wait and observe with his naked eye. This was the limitation of the Weaver scope. It wasn't weatherproof. German Zeiss optics were better sealed, could handle temperature changes without fogging, another advantage for the enemy. When the scope cleared, Bradford began glassing the tree line. 600 yards out, dense pine forest. Excellent cover. The German would be well concealed. Bradford looked for anomalies, unnatural shapes, movement when there should be stillness. For 2 hours, he saw nothing. At 1300 hours, Bradford noticed a pine branch move. No wind. The branch was 80 feet up. Bradford watched. The branch moved again, deliberately. Someone was up there, adjusting position. Bradford calculated the range. 620 yards, cold air. Bullet drop would be significant. He set his scope adjustment. Placed the crosshairs on the branch. Waited. At 1317, he saw the shape. A man in white winter camouflage, positioned in the fork of the tree. The German sniper was observing American positions to the south. Perfect concealment. Except Bradford was north of him, looking at his flank. Bradford controlled his breathing. The cold made this difficult. Each breath created vapor. He waited until his lungs were half empty, held it, began the trigger squeeze. The Springfield recoiled. Through the scope, Bradford saw the German jerk and begin falling. The body tumbled through branches, struck the ground 600 yards distant. First kill. Bradford worked the bolt, ejected the spent case, chambered a fresh round. German snipers worked in pairs. The spotter would be nearby. Bradford scanned surrounding trees, found nothing, waited. 30 minutes passed. Then he caught movement. Ground level, 200 yards north of the tree where the first German had fallen. A man in winter camouflage moving low through undergrowth. The second sniper repositioning. The range was 480 yards. Easier shot. Bradford led the target, fired. The German dropped and didn't move. 2 kills in one afternoon. Bradford withdrew from his position before German infantry could triangulate his location. He reported to the platoon sergeant. The sergeant wanted details. How had Bradford made those shots in these conditions with the standard issue rifle and scope? Bradford didn't mention the valve grinding compound. Didn't mention the 11 hours he'd spent 3 days earlier with a cleaning rod and lead slug, methodically polishing his rifle's barrel. He just said the rifle shot well. The sergeant accepted this. Told Bradford to get some rest. They'd need him again tomorrow. That night, in the bombed-out farmhouse serving as company headquarters, Bradford cleaned his rifle. The other soldiers were sleeping. Bradford worked by candlelight. He field-stripped the Springfield, removed the bolt, inspected the barrel. After 2 kills, after firing 60 rounds over the past week, the barrel was starting to show copper fouling. The residue bullets leave behind as they travel down a bore. In a normal barrel, copper fouling builds up unevenly, adheres to imperfections in the rifling, creates even more surface irregularity. Accuracy degrades. Bradford had seen this happen to other snipers' rifles. They'd start the campaign shooting tight groups. After a few hundred rounds, their accuracy would open up. They'd blame the scope, the ammunition, never the barrel. But Bradford's hand-lapped barrel stayed cleaner. The polished surface didn't give copper fouling as much to cling to. This meant his accuracy would remain consistent longer, would degrade more slowly. This was the advantage nobody talked about in the weapons manuals, not maximum effective range or muzzle velocity, just the simple fact that a properly prepared barrel stayed accurate after other rifles had lost precision. Bradford cleaned his rifle for 2 hours. He used a bronze brush, solvent, patches until they came out white. Then he took the valve grinding compound from his pack, mixed a tiny amount with gun oil, applied it to a clean patch, ran it through the barrel 10 times. This was maintaining the lap, keeping the surface smooth, removing the microscopic copper deposits before they could build up. Other soldiers would have called this obsessive, unnecessary. The rifle worked fine. Why spend 2 hours maintaining it? Bradford knew why. Because in tomorrow's engagement, or the day after, or next week, when he needed to make a shot at 600 yards in the cold and the snow, his rifle would still shoot true when other rifles wouldn't. December 20th. The German offensive was expanding. American units all along the Ardennes front were under pressure. The 99th Division was holding, but barely. German forces had broken through in multiple locations. The town of Bastogne was surrounded. The outcome of the battle was uncertain. Bradford's company was ordered to hold a crossroads 5 miles east of Bastogne. The crossroads controlled access to supply routes the Americans needed to keep open. If the Germans took it, an entire regiment would be cut off. The company commander positioned his men in a defensive perimeter. Bradford was placed in a church bell tower overlooking the crossroads. Elevation advantage. Clear fields of fire. It was a good position. Also obvious. The Germans would target it. At 0800 hours, German infantry began probing the American positions, small groups, feeling for weakness, testing the defenses. Bradford watched through his scope, counted approximately 60 German soldiers in the initial waves. Behind them, out of rifle range, he could see officers coordinating the assault, and somewhere in that forest, he knew, were the German snipers. At 0840, the first American soldier was hit, Corporal Davis, positioned behind a stone wall 200 yards from Bradford's position. One shot. Through the neck, Davis died within seconds. The shot had come from the northeast. High angle, probably another tree position. Bradford swung his scope toward the indicated direction. Dense forest. Hundreds of potential hiding spots. At 09:15, another American was hit. Private Morrison, running between positions, carrying ammunition. Shot through the back. Morrison went down screaming. The medic tried to reach him. A bullet struck the ground 3 feet from the medic's position. Deliberate near miss. Warning. The German sniper was controlling that area, making it impassable. Bradford studied the angles. Both shots had come from roughly the same direction. Northeast, 800 to 1,000 yards. Long range. The German was confident, skilled. Bradford searched through his scope, looked for the unnatural, the out of place. At 09:43, he found it. A flash of reflected light. Brief. 830 yards distant. Top of a massive oak tree. The German sniper's scope had caught sunlight for a fraction of a second. An amateur mistake, but it gave Bradford the location. He watched, saw nothing else. The German had perfect concealment, but Bradford knew where he was, 800 to 30 yards. At the extreme edge of Bradford's effective range, the Weaver scope's 2.75 power magnification was barely adequate at this distance. The cold air would affect bullet drop significantly. Wind was gusting from the west at approximately 10 miles per hour. Bradford would need to compensate for all of it. He made his scope adjustments, elevated the barrel, accounted for wind drift, placed the crosshairs not on the target, but on a point in space where he calculated the bullet and target would meet. It was educated guesswork at this range, precision marksmanship blended with hopeful estimation. Bradford controlled his breathing, slowed his heart rate, squeezed the trigger. The Springfield fired. Through the scope, Bradford watched. 830 yards distant, a shape fell from the oak tree, tumbled through branches, hit the ground. The German sniper was down. The American soldiers near Morrison's position immediately dragged the wounded private to cover. The medic worked on him. Morrison would survive. The area was no longer controlled by the German marksmen. Bradford had broken the suppression. The company commander sent a runner to the bell tower. Good shooting. Hold position. Expect counterattack. At 1000 hours, German artillery began falling on the American positions. Not concentrated fire, harassing rounds, keeping the defenders pinned. The bombardment lasted 40 minutes. When it lifted, German infantry attacked in strength. 2 companies, approximately 300 soldiers, advancing toward the crossroads from 3 directions. The American company had perhaps 150 effectives. They were outnumbered 2 to 1, but they held elevated positions and interlocking fields of fire. The battle became close range and brutal. Small arms fire, grenades. German soldiers reached the stone walls surrounding the crossroads. Hand-to-hand fighting erupted in several locations. Bradford engaged targets methodically. German soldiers advancing across open ground. Officers directing troop movements. Machine gun teams. At this range, 300 yards and closer, the Springfield was devastating. Accurate, reliable. 5 rounds, reload, 5 more rounds, reload. Bradford fired 87 rounds in 35 minutes. His barrel grew hot despite the freezing temperature. The German attack stalled. Without their forward momentum, the assault lost cohesion. American machine guns raked the exposed soldiers. German casualties mounted. At 1100 hours, the German commander ordered withdrawal. The survivors pulled back to the tree line. Left their dead and wounded in the Bart, snow between the forest and the American positions. The crossroads had held. Barely. The American company had taken 30% casualties, but the Germans had lost more, and the supply route remained open. Bradford climbed down from the bell tower. His rifle barrel was too hot to touch. He had fired more rounds in one engagement than he'd fired in the previous week combined. The barrel would need attention. Tonight, he would clean it, relap it, maintain that polished surface that kept his rifle shooting accurately when others degraded. The company medic found Bradford that afternoon, asked him a question. Several soldiers had noticed Bradford's rifle seemed to shoot better than the other M1903A4s in the company. Tighter groups, more consistent accuracy. Was there something different about his rifle, or was Bradford just that good a shot? Bradford considered his answer carefully. Unit armourers would be upset if they knew he'd modified his rifle barrel without authorization. But the medic wasn't asking as a matter of inspection. He was asking because other snipers wanted to know if they could improve their weapon's performance. Bradford made a decision. He would share what he knew. That evening, in the farmhouse, Bradford gathered the company's 3 other designated marksmen. He showed them the valve grinding compound, explained the hand-lapping process, how to make a lead slug, how to measure the bore, how many strokes were needed, what the polished rifling should look like. The other marksmen were skeptical. This wasn't in any manual. The armourers had never mentioned it. How did Bradford know this would work? Bradford's answer was simple. Before the war, he'd been a gunsmith's apprentice. His grandfather had built custom rifles for competitive shooters, men who needed precision, 1-inch groups at 200 yards, smaller if possible. Every custom rifle his grandfather built got hand-lapped. Every single one. It was the difference between a hunting rifle and a competition rifle, between adequate and exceptional. The military didn't hand-lap rifle barrels because it took time and skilled labour. Mass production meant quantity over quality. But a soldier who knew how, who had the materials and the patience, could take a mass-produced rifle and make it perform like a custom build. One of the marksmen asked where to get the lapping compound. Bradford showed them the tin he'd brought from New York, said they could use his. Share it among the 4 of them. 1 tin would last months if used carefully. Another marksman asked how long the lapping process took. Bradford said 11 hours for the initial lap on a new barrel, maybe 6 hours if you were just maintaining an already lapped bore. It was time-intensive, but the alternative was shooting with a rifle that became less accurate every time you fired it. The marksmen agreed to try. They would rotate. One man would lap his barrel while the others pulled security. Then, switch. Within 3 days, all 4 rifles would be lapped. December 23rd. The weather turned colder. Snow fell continuously. Visibility dropped to under 200 yards. German and American forces alike hunkered down. Movement became difficult, resupply nearly impossible. The German offensive had created a bulge in the American lines, but the attack was losing momentum. Fuel shortages, supply line disruptions, American reinforcements arriving from other sectors. But the sniping continued. Both sides used the limited visibility to reposition, to probe enemy lines, to eliminate high-value targets when opportunities appeared. Bradford and the other American marksmen found themselves in a war within a war, a parallel conflict where individual shooters hunted each other through frozen forests and ruined towns. December 25th, Christmas Day. The temperature was 28 degrees Fahrenheit, clear sky. The snow had stopped. For the first time in days, visibility extended, beyond 300 yards. Both sides observed an unofficial truce during daylight hours. No major attacks, no artillery, just watchful waiting. But someone hadn't received the word about the truce. At 1300 hours, an American lieutenant was shot while coordinating supply distribution. Through the shoulder. Non-fatal, but the lieutenant was evacuated. The shot came from long range, north of the American positions. A German sniper was active. Bradford volunteered to find him. The company commander hesitated. "Christmas Day. Maybe let it go." Bradford insisted. The German had violated the informal truce. The sniper needed to be neutralized before he killed someone else. The commander approved. Bradford took his rifle and moved north. He established a position in a stone barn 300 yards from the American perimeter. Elevation advantage. Clear view of the area where the German sniper had fired from. Bradford settled in and waited. German snipers were patient. They wouldn't move during daylight, wouldn't give away their position. But eventually, they had to shift, adjust, prepare for withdrawal. Bradford would wait for that moment. Hours passed. The sun began setting at 1600 hours. The temperature dropped further. Bradford's hands were numb despite gloves. His feet had lost feeling. He remained motionless, watching. At 1642, in the fading light, Bradford saw movement, 900 yards distant. A figure in white winter camouflage emerging from a hide beneath fallen trees. The German sniper was withdrawing to his night position. 900 yards, beyond Bradford's comfortable range. But possible. He made his scope adjustments, compensated for the extreme cold, the low light, the distance, placed his crosshairs on the moving figure, and led him, accounted for the walking speed, squeezed the trigger. The Springfield fired. 900 yards away, the German stumbled and fell. Bradford couldn't tell if it was a killing hit or a wound. But the figure didn't get up, didn't move. Either dead or severely injured. Bradford waited. No return fire came. No additional movement. The German sniper was out of action. Bradford withdrew from the barn and returned to friendly lines. Reported his engagement. The company commander logged it. 1 enemy sniper eliminated or wounded. Christmas Day, 1944. That night, Bradford cleaned his rifle again. The other company marksmen joined him. They'd all lapped their barrels following Bradford's instructions. They compared notes. All three reported improved accuracy. Tighter shot groups, more consistent performance. One marksman had engaged a German sniper at 700 yards 2 days earlier. Made the kill on the first shot. Before lapping his barrel, he would have needed multiple rounds to find the range. The marksman asked Bradford where he'd learned this technique. Bradford told them about his grandfather, about the gunsmith shop in Harrisburg, about the competition shooters who demanded precision and wouldn't accept anything less than perfect. His grandfather had taught him that equipment mattered, that a craftsman maintained his tools, that the difference between success and failure often came down to understanding your equipment better than your opponent understood his. One of the marksmen asked if German snipers knew about barrel lapping. Bradford said probably. German engineering was excellent. German gunsmiths certainly understood the technique. But German military doctrine emphasized mass production and standardization, just like American doctrine. The difference was that Bradford had civilian gunsmithing knowledge the military didn't teach, had taken initiative to modify his equipment outside official channels. The marksmen discussed whether they should report this to higher command. Let unit armourers know that barrel lapping significantly improved rifle accuracy. Bradford counselled against it. The army had procedures, regulations. If they reported unofficial modifications, they'd likely be ordered to stop. Their rifles might be confiscated and replaced with standard-issue weapons. Better to keep it quiet. Share the knowledge among marksmen who could benefit. But don't publicize it. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. December 28th. The German offensive was collapsing. American forces had held Bastogne, despite being surrounded. Patton's Third Army had broken through from the south. fresh Allied divisions were arriving. The weather had cleared, allowing Allied aircraft to dominate the skies. German forces began withdrawing. The Battle of the Bulge was entering its final phase, but the fighting remained intense. German rearguard actions were fierce. Every withdrawal was contested. Snipers on both sides continued operating. The frozen forests of the Ardennes had become a killing ground where individual marksmen made the difference between successful advances and costly delays. Bradford's company pushed east, following the retreating Germans. They moved through shattered towns, abandoned equipment, dead soldiers from both sides frozen in the snow where they'd fallen. The landscape was devastation. The Ardennes offensive had cost both sides horrifically. American casualties would exceed 80,000, German casualties even higher. January 3, 1945. Bradford's company entered a small Belgian town 15 miles east of Bastogne. The Germans had withdrawn during the night. American scouts confirmed the town was clear. The company moved in to establish defensive positions. At 1100 hours, the company commander was shot, through the head, instantly fatal. The shot came from a church steeple 400 yards north. The Germans hadn't withdrawn completely. They'd left a sniper behind, probably with orders to delay the American advance, kill officers, create chaos. The tactic worked. With the company commander dead, command devolved to the executive officer. Confusion spread through the unit. Soldiers took cover. The advance halted. Bradford identified the church steeple as the sniper's position. He established a counter position in a destroyed house with a clear view of the steeple. The range was 420 yards. Bradford settled in and waited. The German sniper had revealed his position with that one shot. Now he had two choices: remain in the steeple and risk counter-sniper fire, or withdraw and abandon his position. Bradford watched the steeple through his scope. Minutes passed. At 11:23, he saw movement in the steeple's bell tower, a figure in German field grey uniform. The sniper was repositioning, preparing for another shot. Bradford placed his crosshairs on the center mass of the figure, controlled his breathing, fired. 420 yards. The German jerked backward and disappeared from view. Hit. Bradford waited. No return fire, no additional movement in the steeple. The German sniper was either dead or wounded too badly to continue fighting. American infantry moved forward, cleared the church, found the German sniper dead in the bell tower, single shot through the chest. The sniper had been equipped with a carabiner 98K with a 4-power Zeiss scope, an excellent rifle. The German had been experienced, but experience hadn't been enough when Bradford made a perfect first-round hit at over 400 yards. The company executive officer, now acting commander, found Bradford after the engagement, asked how Bradford consistently made these long-range kills. Other American snipers were getting results, but Bradford's performance was exceptional. Was it training? Natural talent? Better equipment? Bradford considered revealing the barrel lapping, decided to share. The company had lost too many people. If this knowledge could help other marksmen survive and eliminate enemy snipers more effectively, it should be shared. Bradford explained the entire process to the executive officer. The hand lapping, the valve grinding compound, the hours of work required, the maintenance routine. The executive officer listened, made notes, said he would report this to regimental headquarters. Maybe the technique could be taught to other snipers, made part of the training program. Bradford said that would be good. Anything that improved marksmanship and saved American lives was worth doing. The executive officer thanked Bradford, told him he was doing exceptional work. The company needed him. January 15th, 1945. The Battle of the Bulge was officially over. The German offensive had been defeated. Allied forces had restored the front lines. The path to Germany was clear. The 99th Infantry Division had held its positions through 3 weeks of the heaviest fighting on the Western Front. They had stopped the German advance when it mattered most. Bradford had survived. His company had been reduced to 60% strength. Many friends were dead, many more wounded and evacuated, but the survivors had done their job. They had held the line, and Bradford's rifle, the standard issue M1903A4 that he'd hand-lapped with valve grinding, compound and obsessive maintenance, had performed flawlessly through hundreds of rounds in the worst conditions imaginable. Bradford's confirmed kill count stood at 16. 16 German soldiers eliminated at ranges from 200 to 900 yards, 16 engagements where his rifle's exceptional accuracy had made the difference, where the hours of hand-lapping had paid off, where civilian gunsmithing knowledge applied to military equipment had created an advantage. But Bradford didn't think of it as 16 kills. He thought of it as 16 engagements where American soldiers didn't die because a German sniper had been eliminated. First, 16 times when superior marksmanship and superior equipment preparation had won the individual duel. That was what mattered. The technique Bradford had discovered through necessity began spreading through the 99th Infantry Division's sniper sections. By late January 1945, 12 American marksmen were hand-lapping their Springfield barrels. The results were consistent: improved accuracy, tighter shot groups, more first-round hits at extended range. A lieutenant from division headquarters interviewed Bradford in February. The officer wanted to document the barrel-lapping procedure for inclusion in updated marksmanship training materials. Bradford spent 2 hours explaining every detail: the type of abrasive compound, the lead slug dimensions, the number of strokes required, the maintenance schedule. The lieutenant took extensive notes, said this information would be forwarded to ordnance specialists stateside. Whether that report ever reached anyone who could implement it systematically remains unknown. The war in Europe ended 3 months later. American weapon development priorities shifted to the Pacific Theater, then to post-war reorganization. The M1903 Springfield was phased out of frontline service. The hand-lapping technique Bradford had used faded into obscurity, but the fundamental principle Bradford had demonstrated remained valid: that a soldier who understood his equipment could improve its performance, that mass-produced military hardware could be enhanced through skilled craftsmanship. That knowledge mattered as much as courage. The German snipers Bradford faced were professionals, well-trained, well-equipped, experienced from years of combat on the Eastern Front. Their Karabiner 98K rifles were excellent weapons. Their Zeiss optics were superior to American scopes. Their doctrine was sound. Yet Bradford and the other American marksmen who adopted his technique achieved results that matched or exceeded the German performance. The difference wasn't the base equipment. Both sides used bolt-action rifles of comparable quality. The difference was what Bradford did to his equipment after receiving it. The hours spent hand-polishing the barrel interior, the obsessive maintenance, the application of civilian gunsmithing knowledge to military weapons. That created the edge. This is the truth behind the story. There was no secret weapon, no classified modification, no special barrel grinding technique issued by ordnance departments. Just a farm boy from Pennsylvania who knew how rifles worked, who had access to a tin of valve grinding compound, and who was willing to spend 11 hours doing work the military never asked for. William Bradford survived the war. He was discharged in November 1945 with the rank of sergeant, returned to Harrisburg, worked in his grandfather's gunsmith shop until 1952, when he opened his own business. He built custom rifles for competition shooters and hunters for 40 years, retired in 1992. He rarely spoke about the war. When asked about his sniper service, he would say only that he'd done his job and been fortunate to survive. He never mentioned the hand-lapping, never wrote about his technique. The knowledge stayed with him, used in his civilian gunsmithing but never publicized as a wartime innovation. Bradford died in 2003 at age 81. His obituary in the Harrisburg newspaper mentioned his Purple Heart and Bronze Star, mentioned his gunsmith business, didn't mention that he'd eliminated 16 German snipers during the Battle of the Bulge, using a rifle he'd modified with hardware store compound and old-fashioned craftsmanship. The M1903 Springfield that Bradford used during the war was never returned to him. It went back into Army inventory in 1945, likely was refurbished and reissued during the Korean War, then eventually surplused or destroyed. The rifle that had been hand-lapped to exceptional accuracy was returned to standard configuration or scrapped. The barrel Bradford had spent 11 hours perfecting was just another piece of surplus military equipment. But the lesson remains. In modern warfare, where technology and industrial production dominate, individual knowledge and craftsmanship still matter. A soldier who understands his equipment can make it perform beyond its designed specifications, can create advantages that weren't engineered at the factory, can turn adequate into exceptional through skill and dedication. The German snipers in the Ardennes were defeated not by superior American equipment, but by American resourcefulness, by soldiers like William Bradford who refused to accept that adequate was good enough, who took initiative, who applied knowledge the military didn't teach, who spent 11 hours with a cleaning rod and abrasive compound, creating an edge measured in fractions of an inch but resulting in hits at 900 yards. This is the real story of American marksmanship in World War II, not secret weapons or classified programs, but individual soldiers making their equipment work better through knowledge, effort, and refusal to accept limitations. William Bradford's hand-lapped Springfield was just one example among thousands of similar stories. Soldiers who modified their gear, adapted their tactics, found solutions to problems the manuals never addressed. The title promised a gun-grinding trick. The reality was simpler and more profound. A young man who knew how rifles worked took the time to make his work better. That knowledge, applied with patience and skill, made the difference between being adequate and being exceptional, between surviving and dying, between 16 German snipers eliminated and 16 more American soldiers who came home. That's the truth worth remembering. Not the mythology of secret weapons, but the reality of craftsmanship, knowledge, and dedication applied under the worst circumstances imaginable. William Bradford's story reminds us that, in war, as in life, understanding your tools and refusing to accept their limitations can make all the difference. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.